The Bible reminds us in 1 Samuel chapter 16 verse 7 that God does not see as man sees. And when we read the story of Jacob in Genesis chapter 29, it clearly shows that sometimes hard work doesn't always guarantee fair treatment, because Jacob serves Laban faithfully for 7 years, just serving to get Rachel. And when we read verse 20 of chapter 29, it says that these years seemed like only a few days to him because of the love that he had for Rachel. Now, that is dedication. Sometimes when we put our energy and our mind to something, we clearly dedicate ourselves to it. We never realize how fast time can fly. But also it shows consistency and patience. Working for 7 good years, day in, day out, and working for something that you've dedicated your time to it. But surprisingly, when the time comes for Jacob to receive what could have been his pay or his wage, Laban changes the deal. And through manipulation and deception, Jacob wakes up to find Leah instead of Rachel. And you realize that one of the hardest lessons in life is realizing that you can do your part very well and still be treated unfairly by others. So it does not matter how good you are or how honest you have been, people will treat you unfairly if it is to their own benefit. They might not care what you have done or not done. But here is the encouragement. Yes, people may be unfair, that is true, but you ought to keep your character. Hebrews 4:13 tells us that nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. So God sees. Your faithful is not wasted simply because someone else was dishonest. No, you keep being honest regardless of how dishonest others are being, because God keeps records, and his records are very different. And because he keeps these records, he will repay in his own way, and it is always the best. Now, Laban was governed by self-interest, and his course toward Jacob was deceptive and unjust. Just like many of us, sometimes we are driven by our own self-interests, and we are unjust to our fellow human beings. But the Bible does not excuse Laban. It just exposes him. And in that exposure, it also gives us a warning that we should not become like the people who wrong us. Yes, I know unfair treatment can tempt us to be bitter. It can tempt us to go into thinking about revenge and compromising a lot of things just to make sure we level the ground. But we cannot overcome evil. We only have to overcome evil by good. We cannot overcome evil by evil. That's what Romans 12:21 says. We need to overcome evil by doing good. So this story of Jacob also highlights something very important. And it is a pressure that still exists even today in our own world. Our culture and family systems can pressure personal choices. When you look at Laban, he justifies his manipulation towards Jacob by leaning towards the custom. When he says it is not in our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one. Of course, you will notice that a cultural rule here becomes a cover-up for his dishonesty. But culture and other circumstances around us should never be license for wrongdoing. So if you're doing something wrong, do not hide behind culture. Do not hide behind the human law. Do not hide behind religion. Some of us hide behind religion. So if you're doing something wrong, it is still wrong. And God calls us to be honest. He calls us to integrity. Even when everyone is doing something the wrong way, We are called upon to keep doing what is right, to keep our honesty, to keep our integrity, even when things might seem like everyone is running a different race. But if you're running a race of integrity, be ready to stand alone, and it is always profitable. Now, sometimes when you keep your integrity, your character becomes more valuable than the outcome. Sometimes we are scared of keeping our integrity because probably we are going to stand alone, or people are not going to look at us as wise. Yes, there is a cost to that. And Proverbs chapter 10 verse 9 says that whoever walks in integrity walks securely. So in all that we do and in all our endeavors, let's seek wise, lawful steps. When you look at Jacob, he confronted Laban with a direct question: what have you done to me? So there is always a place for clear conversations and appropriate action without revenge. Have those conversations that people don't want to have. Stand boldly and ask the questions that people don't want to ask. If you feel you're being treated unfairly, don't just sit down and die in silence. Speak up, but do not come out to revenge. Let the Lord be your vindicator in everything. The book of Psalms reminds us that we should commit our ways to the Lord, and He will do the rest for us. So, if you are in a season where you feel cheated, where you feel overlooked, or where you feel manipulated, don't let this unfairness that you're going through rewrite your identity. God is seeing and is going to judge rightly. And He still can bless a faithful person in the middle of an unfair system. So don't look at the systems that are treating you badly, the systems that are manipulating you, the systems that are treating you unfairly, and think that God has forgotten you. No, He will still bless you in that circumstance where you are, as long as you remain faithful and keep committed. Keep your integrity, be truthful. He will always reward you, and He will always bless you for that. So as we close this evening, I want to give you something to reflect upon. Where have you experienced unfair treatment in the recent days, or it might even have been today, in the recent hours? And how are you going to respond with integrity rather than bitterness in that unfair treatment that you have received, in that manipulation that you have received today or in the past? How are you preparing to respond? Are you preparing to respond with bitterness, or are you planning to keep your integrity? Also, is there a culture or normal practice around you that pressures you to compromise your honesty? You need to set boundaries and know what boundary are you going to set so that you keep being honest, you keep your integrity intact, even regardless of the abnormal practices that might be putting you to the wall. So as we close this evening, I want you to reflect on those two questions. How are you going to how are you responding to those unfair treatment? And what boundaries are you setting for some of these cultures that are pressurizing you to compromise your honesty? I want to wish you a good night, or a good afternoon, or a good morning from wherever you're watching from. And I pray that may God see every effort and injustice that we are going through. May He strengthen you to remain faithful, even when people become so unfair to you. And I will keep praying that He will keep our hearts from bitterness and guard us from using the cultural and religious and circumstantial excuses to compromise. So today I want to ask God that He may give you wisdom to always respond rightly and give you the courage to speak out whenever you're being treated unfairly, but speak out with truth, with respect and peace. And I hope that God will keep you safe and He will guide you all through. God bless you.